Hello, Christina. Your painted color wheel shows a lot of time and attention, and the colors there look good. Maybe violet and red violet could have more blue in them. Maybe a little more blue in yellow green, for example. Um, Now, your digital color wheel, all the RGB values for the primaries and secondaries are right on. I'm looking at the bottom right there, colors between green and cyan, and I'm thinking you've got a couple of tints, so I'd like you to check that area. Also, if I were working on this, I think I'd make one arrow and copy it multiple times, and then it seems from Photoshop, I'd do edit, transform, rotate to get it in the right orientation. Hi, Lakia. What a nice painted color wheel. The layout looks just perfect. Um, I think you struggled with violets, which is something a lot of people had a hard time with. Um, use a tiny touch of white to reveal the hue and also make sure that you have the best red, which would be quinacridone or alizarin. Now, looking at your digital color wheel, well, let's see. There's certain things we want here. For example, we want this to match the digital color wheel given in class, and I reproduced that here by your work. So cyan should be opposite red, and green and magenta should be opposite also. And another matter is that we wanted to have fully saturated colors. So I'd like you to review the lesson I made for the class to be sure that you understand the concepts and can get that software doing what you want it to. Vicky, what a beautiful color wheel. You clearly took a lot of care to assemble this. Um, things look quite good. Uh, Probably the violets could use a little adjustment. And as I've been telling others, with colors where ultramarine is part of the recipe, use a tiny touch of white to reveal the hue. Another problem people sometimes have with violets is they don't have the best red. You want to have a red that's already leaning in the direction of violet, like quinacridone or an alizarin. Brandy, I can see a lot of care was taken in assembling your painted color wheel here. You know, um, hmm, I see that yellow and blue stand out, and that suggests that, for instance, the three greens could be altered a bit so that there's more interval between them, so that yellow green was a little more like yellow and blue green was a little more like blue. Also with violets, use a tiny touch of white to reveal the hue and make sure you've got the right red, which would be a quinacridone or an alizarin. Now, with your digital color wheel, well, this is fun, musical. One matter is it usually does help to have the digital color wheel have its ends meet. Any color wheel will make most sense that way. And I'm looking at this thinking that maybe if you can't make a circle or if that didn't suit your idea, a figure eight. I can see that you've got magenta and cyan here, so you're working with the right color set. However, it's very hard for me to find a shape that has the ideal RGB values for the given colors as was noted in an announcement and also in the assignment. Hi Tina, I can see a lot of time went into creating this painted color wheel. It's neatly presented. Let's take a look at those violets. They are very dark and it's hard to see the interval between them. For instance, red violet should be transitioning toward red. Um, Use a tiny touch of white when you're mixing the violets and be sure that you have the right red, which would be a quinacridone or maybe a alizarin. With your greens, they also look dark, and the blue you need for mixing those is cerulean. Let's take a look at yellow green. Now that color is quite a lot darker than the yellow. And for mixing colors, I'd say use the lighter color first, that would be the yellow here, and add tiny touches of the cerulean until you get the yellow green you need. Now onto the digital color wheel. Wow, a starburst. Obviously you have a handle on the software. I'm looking at the arrangement. Let's look to the digital color wheel that I put in the top left of this page in the film strip with your art. Notice how cyan is straight across from red. Now, I do see cyan in your color wheel, and that's telling me that you're thinking about the right color set. I also see magenta. Those colors are specific to the digital color wheel. However, across from magenta, we should see green. And across from blue, there should be yellow. So I think you're thinking of the traditional complements. So check the theory and be sure you've got that under your belt. Tanya, looking at your painted color wheel, red violet is a really good example here. Um, and the colors all look pretty good. One thing you can do to improve presentation with a project like this is to paint on blank paper and then trim that blank paper to fit the shapes on the template. That way you don't have the words showing through. Now, with your digital color wheel, well, I can see you have the right color set in mind. For example, there's magenta and there's cyan. Those are colors belonging to the digital color wheel. I wonder whether you may be in CMYK color mode though, because the colors aren't as brilliant as they could be. Or make sure that you're working with the RGB values. And I hope you're able to see that lesson that I made for everybody, because that did show exactly how to do it. You can just sample straight from the color wheel and get the right colors. One last thing is that if you're able to emphasize the primaries and secondaries with placement or size, that helps us know what's what and to see complements, for example. Hi, Tiffany, looking at your painted color wheel. Well, I'd say based on the color of the page that maybe your scanner was scanning this a little dark, in which case, if you're in Photoshop, you can do layer, new adjustment layer, brightness and contrast, and use the brightness slider to adjust things. So, I'm guessing that your violets may be a little dark, and you probably heard me say add a tiny touch of white. And I do that only with the violets, not with the greens. In the case of green, add a little more yellow. Maybe there could be more variation in your reds and red oranges. Notice how yellow stands out. Its immediate neighbors look a lot different. And when you're mixing colors, you want to start with a lighter color and add tiny touches of the second color, the other colors, until you get what you want. So start with yellow and add just a little bit of blue at a time until you get the desired yellow-green. Now, look at this digital color wheel. You are one person who really made some significant changes since the draft phase, and this is quite beautiful. Your RGB values are right on for the primaries and secondaries. If I had to say anything about this, in terms of ways to improve it, it would be check the white stars and make sure that they're positioned in even increments. Hello, Althea. Your painted color wheel is quite beautiful. The interval is nice between the colors. There are several colors though that look like tints, so I would say hold off on adding white unless it's absolutely necessary. For instance, in colors like violet, you might want the tiniest touch of white. Also, I'll say choose artist grade colors. If you use kids' tempera paint, for example, oftentimes there's white mixed in with a color that's used as a filler, and that makes the paint more affordable. In the case of your digital color wheel, things look quite good. I'm not seeing the ideal RGB values that were given. However, I note that you have cyan and magenta colors specific to the digital wheel. I wish that this was a more regular shaped wheel, and that would help me to see that you've got colors in right places. One problem looks to be that there's not a cyan directly across from red as you see in the color wheel here. Well, checking again, I think I do see a red and cyan opposite each other. Generally, red is at the top of the color wheel. Hi, Robin. Looking at your digital color wheel here, this is quite beautiful. It doesn't use the grid guides or snapping, which is something you will want to practice. However, I do see that the primaries and secondaries have been emphasized, and if we concentrate on the exterior, the colors do wrap around and make a circle. I'm not seeing the ideal RGB values as noted. However, I am curious as to how you made this. It's a lovely method. Hi, Rachel. This is a nice painted color wheel. Colors look a little bit pale, and that might be because of your scanner. Excepting the violets, where you might use a tiny touch of white to reveal the hue.